Hello everyone. I'm so glad you've come back to my channel today. As always, we'll continue following the emotional story of LyTuDiep and CEO James, a love that is both beautiful and filled with challenges. In the previous episodes, I'm sure you all remember, after many hardships, James and Diep chose to place love and compassion above hatred. They took a path that few would dare to walk, extending their hands to shelter John, the very man who once opposed them and caused so much pain. Instead of erasing the past, they allowed him to stay in their old house, giving John a chance to start over. This was not only a surprising decision but also a turning point that changed the course of life for all three. Diep, with her forgiving heart, James, with the strength of a man shaped by experience, and John, with eyes full of regret and a fragile hope for redemption. In the early days, the audience could clearly feel the fresh atmosphere surrounding the old house. John quietly tidied the yard, repaired doors, and carefully tended to every corner as if to prove he truly wanted to change. Diep noticed this and gradually felt her guard soften. James, though still reserved, sometimes revealed a spark of belief in his decision. And among them all, little Nee, innocent and carefree, quickly treated John like an uncle. Each time she saw him, she greeted him with a bright smile, lightening the mood for everyone. Yet behind this seemingly fragile peace lurked shadows of uncertainty. At night, John was sometimes found sitting alone on the porch for a long time, his eyes gazing into the distance, burdened with an unspoken sorrow. Meanwhile, around James and Diep's new home, unusual signs began to appear. A fleeting figure near the fence, strange noises in the dark, or eyes that seemed to watch from afar. So, does John's presence truly bring peace? Or will he, whether unintentionally or not, become the bridge that draws new dangers into James and Diep's small family? Stay tuned until the end of today's video, and don't miss a single detail, because the most dramatic and unexpected events are still waiting ahead. After the first hesitant days, little Nee finally grew accustomed to school. Every morning, as the school bell rang, she eagerly skipped into the yard, her face lit up with a radiant smile. She would run to hug her teacher tightly, then turn around and wave goodbye to her parents who stood at the gate. That fleeting moment was enough for James and Diep to feel the pure innocence and joy within their daughter. In the afternoons, the moment she stepped into the car, Nee would chatter nonstop about everything that had happened in class. One day, she learned a new song and sang it so passionately that her classmates burst into applause. Another day, she played hide-and-seek with her friends and proudly announced that she had found 3 kids hiding in the bushes. On yet another afternoon, she excitedly told her parents that her teacher praised her drawing and gave her a red paper flower as a reward. These seemingly trivial stories made James and Diep smile with happiness as they listened, as though they were reliving the most innocent days of their own childhood. While Nee was gradually growing more confident in her new environment, Diep became increasingly devoted to making their home warm and beautiful. She spent hours rearranging the small kitchen, carefully choosing floral curtains in the soft tones she loved. On the windowsill, she placed green potted plants so that every morning, the sunlight streaming through the glass would fall upon the fresh greenery, making the house come alive. In her free time, she folded colorful paper flowers to place in a clear glass vase, or sat sketching small drawings to hang in the living room, hoping that every wall and window would be filled with the breath of happiness. James, though constantly busy and pressured with work at the company, always tried his best to carve out time for family. Some days, while colleagues were still buried in papers and contracts, he would shut down his computer early and rush home. As the wind blew through his car window, his heart grew lighter, because he knew that at the end of the road lay a brightly lit house, Diep's gentle smile, and Nee's clear, joyful voice calling him. For James, no reward was more precious than sitting down at a simple dinner table, watching the 2 people he loved most smile together. On weekends, the family would clean and arrange the new furniture they had bought. James, strong and steady, carried tables and chairs. Diep, quick and meticulous, polished shelves and checked drawers, while little niece scurried around, her tiny hands helping with odds and ends. Sometimes she would playfully order her parents around, making the whole family burst into laughter. Her cheerful giggles echoed through the house, blending with the lively chatter, filling the still cluttered space with life. When the work was finally done, the room seemed to take on a whole new look. Shiny pieces of furniture stood neatly in place, flowers bloomed under the soft yellow lights, and the aroma of freshly cooked food drifted from the kitchen. The family gathered around the dinner table that Diep had lovingly prepared. The clinking of spoons against bowls blended with cheerful conversation. From time to time, Nee would burst into uncontrollable laughter at one of her father's jokes, before nestling her head against her mother, making the warmth of the moment even more complete. As night fell, the new house, though still lacking some conveniences, was filled with love in every corner. Outside, the wind gently brushed against the porch. Inside, the golden glow of the lamp reflected off the happy faces of 3 people. In each other's embrace, James, Diep, and Nee silently felt it in their hearts, a new journey as a family had truly begun. Though the road ahead might hold unforeseen challenges, their love and trust were more than enough to carry them forward together. In the old house that James and Diep left behind, John began a new life. At first, the silence and emptiness of the place made him feel deeply lost. The time-worn walls and moss-stained roof tiles evoked memories of a stormy past he himself had caused. Each night, as he sat alone in the deserted house, John lay awake wondering, was he truly worthy of this second chance? In the beginning, the neighbors looked at him with wary eyes. Some quietly avoided him, while others whispered behind his back. John understood. After all, he had once spread pain and hatred. How could he expect immediate trust? So, instead of defending himself or trying to explain, he chose silence and patience, determined to prove himself through action. He sought out day labor at small construction sites around the village, taking on the hardest jobs that few wanted, hauling bricks and stones, clearing land, working as a helper from dawn till dusk. Each evening, his shirt was soaked in sweat, his calloused hands rough and sore, yet his eyes carried a faint glimmer of renewed hope. Gradually, some neighbors began to change their perception. They saw a John who was quiet but hardworking, no longer arrogant as before. An elderly woman passing by gave him a subtle nod of acknowledgement. A carpenter invited him to help saw wood, small gestures of silent acceptance. Not stopping there, John also offered to restore the neglected garden behind the house. He cleared weeds, tilled the soil, and planted a few clusters of flowers with his own hands. Sometimes, curious village children would peek in, watching him toil. When they called out, "Uncle John," their innocent smiles warmed his heart. And yet, there were moments when, after his work was done, John found himself staring toward James and Diep's new home. From a distance, he could hear little Nee's laughter ringing out across the yard, Diep's gentle voice calling to her, or catch sight of James' steadfast figure carrying Nee on his shoulders. The scene cut into him like a blade. He felt small, overwhelmed by waves of regret for the mistakes that had cast him out of the circle of family and happiness. Once, sitting alone on the porch, John gazed at the warm light shining from that house in the night. His eyes grew red, his lips trembled as though forming an apology, but the words caught in his throat. Inside, a quiet yearning surged, the longing to be forgiven, to be accepted, and, someday, to play a part in protecting the fragile happiness James and Diep were building. In the old house that James and Diep left behind, John began a new life. At first, the silence and emptiness made him feel utterly lost. The time-worn walls and moss-stained roof tiles reminded him of a stormy past he himself had caused. Every night, as he sat alone in the deserted house, John wrestled with the same thought: was he truly worthy of this second chance? In the early days, neighbors watched him with suspicion. Some quietly avoided him, others whispered behind his back. John understood, he had once spread pain and hatred. How could he expect immediate trust? So instead of defending himself or making excuses, he chose silence and patience, determined to prove himself through actions. He sought out day labor at small construction sites around the village, taking on the hardest jobs few wanted, hauling bricks and stones, clearing land, assisting builders from morning till dusk. Each evening, his shirt was soaked in sweat and his hands rough with calluses, yet in his eyes flickered a fragile new hope. Gradually, a few neighbors began to change their perception. They saw a John who was quiet but hardworking, no longer arrogant as before. An elderly woman passing by nodded in greeting. A carpenter called him over to help saw wood, small gestures of unspoken acceptance. Not stopping there, John offered to restore the overgrown garden behind the house. He cleared weeds, tilled the soil, and planted clusters of flowers with his own hands. Sometimes, curious children would peek in, see him working diligently, and call out, "Uncle John." Their innocent smiles warmed his heart. Yet there were moments when, after finishing his work, John found himself gazing silently toward James and Diep's new home. From afar, he could hear little Nee's laughter echoing in the yard, Diep's gentle voice calling her, or catch sight of James' strong figure carrying Nee on his shoulders. The scene cut deep, like a knife twisting inside. He felt small, overwhelmed by a flood of regret for the mistakes that had cast him out of family and happiness. Once, sitting alone on the porch, John looked at the warm glow of that home shining faintly through the night. His eyes grew red, his lips trembled as though to whisper an apology, but the words caught in his throat. Deep inside, a quiet yearning surged, a longing to be forgiven, to be accepted, and someday, to help protect the fragile happiness that James and Diep were building. That night, the new house sank into silence. The warm yellow light from the living room spilled across the patchy brick yard, while the wind rustled through the grapefruit trees. James was seated, reviewing some papers, when he suddenly heard a faint noise outside in the garden. The swish of leaves, then the sound of footsteps, light and deliberate, as if someone was trying to hide. He frowned and set the documents down on the table. His instincts told him this was not just a stray cat or a passing breeze. Moving toward the window, he gently pulled the curtain aside. His heart skipped a beat. Outside, under the shadow of the trees, stood a tall, thin figure, motionless, watching the house. In the flickering light, James caught a glimpse of something unsettling. The figure looked strikingly like John. Without a second thought, James pushed the door open and sprinted outside. The night was heavy, the wind cold against his face, but his strides were urgent and relentless. "John! Is that you?" James shouted, his firm voice echoing through the garden. The figure flinched, then turned to face him. For a brief instant, James saw the eyes that seemed both familiar and distant. But in the very next moment, the shadow spun around and bolted, disappearing into the night beyond the trees. James dashed after him, feet pounding against the damp earth, but the gap between them widened with every step. The sound of the fleeing footsteps grew faint, then vanished completely behind the bamboo grove near the lane. When James reached the spot, there was nothing left, only darkness, the chirping of night insects, and the sound of his own ragged breath. He stood still, scanning the surroundings for any trace. But there was nothing, only an eerie stillness. A heavy unease pressed against his chest. If that was John, why would he appear near the house only to run away? But if it wasn't him, then who was out there, pretending to be him? Slowly, James returned inside, careful not to alarm Diep or little Nee. Yet in his eyes, a sharp vigilance remained. The shadow in the night felt like an omen, warning that new storms might already be on their way, threatening the fragile peace his family had only just begun to grasp. The next morning, the pale light of dawn cast a faint glow, with dewdrops still sparkling on the leaves. The dirt road leading to the old house was damp from the night's mist, while the distant crow of roosters echoed across the quiet countryside. James and Diep walked briskly, their faces marked by solemnity. They had just endured a restless night, haunted by the shadowy figure lurking in their garden. John's old house sat tucked beneath rows of areca palms, its moss-covered roof tiles still showing streaks of green. Smoke from the kitchen rose lazily into the air, carrying the faint smell of burning wood. John sat on the porch, calloused hands gripping a splitting axe, the rhythmic thud of chopping wood ringing across the empty yard. When he heard hurried footsteps approaching, he startled and looked up. Seeing James and Diep, he froze briefly, his eyes flickering with unease, before quickly wiping his hands on his trousers and standing to face them. James wasted no time on pleasantries. His voice was firm, his gaze piercing. "Last night, I saw someone lurking near our new house. The figure looked very much like you. Can you explain this?" John stiffened, his face paling. He blinked rapidly, searching for words. At last, he shook his head quickly. "No, it's not what you think. I had no bad intentions. I just happened to pass by." Beside James, Diep clasped her hands tightly together, her eyes fixed on John with a mixture of suspicion and unease. She remembered James returning late the night before, his face tense, his eyes unsettled. Now the wooden house fell silent again, broken only by the dull sound of dry logs tumbling to the ground, each thud deepening the heaviness in the air. The moment stretched endlessly. Then John exhaled, his shoulders slumping. Looking straight into James's eyes, his voice cracked, as if long-suppressed words were finally breaking free. "The truth is, I didn't want to hide it. Yes, I did come near your house last night. I was bringing a small gift, as a token of gratitude for giving me a place to stay, for giving me a chance to rebuild my life." James and Diep exchanged a stunned glance. John pressed on, his tone urgent, his eyes glinting with genuine worry. "But when I got closer, I saw a stranger by your fence. He was watching your house. I suspected something, so I chased after him. He realized it and fled toward the main road. I tried to keep up, but when we reached the street, he leapt into a car where his accomplices were waiting. They sped off, and I was left helpless. I swear to you both, I had no intention of harming your family." The morning sun slanted through the doorway, lighting John's face. It revealed exhaustion, sincerity, and a hint of desperation. His voice wavered as though he was offering his heart as proof. Diep turned slightly to her husband, her eyes clouded with conflicting emotions, suspicion, pity, but above all, a vague, gnawing fear. Was John telling the truth? Or was this merely a clever escape from James's interrogation? James remained silent, his hands clenched tight, veins rising along his wrists. His voice, when it came, was low and heavy. "If it's true there's someone else watching us, then the danger is far greater than we imagined." The old house fell into silence once more. Even the chirping birds in the garden could not dispel the chill creeping into the room. John's confession hung in the air like a missing puzzle piece, hinting at a hidden force lurking in the shadows. James stood frozen, as if a heavy stone pressed down on his chest. John's words had shaken him, leaving him torn between unease and confusion, his thoughts tangled in a storm of doubt and belief. Years of surviving the ruthless world of business, facing every kind of trickery and deceit, had taught James how fragile the line between truth and lies could be, thin enough for a single glance to blur. Yet John's eyes at this moment, tired, sincere, and laced with despair, were not something he could dismiss so easily. Diep stood silently beside her husband. Her heart, softer and more empathetic by nature, stirred as she listened. John's account moved her, yet fear crept into her every breath. She clasped her hands tightly, her voice trembling but resolute. If there really is someone else targeting our family, then the danger is far greater than we imagined. Her words sliced through the already heavy air like a blade. The old house sank into silence. Only the wind whistled faintly through the gaps in the walls, carrying with it a chill that made each of them shiver. Even the morning birds outside sounded hoarse and weak, as though foretelling misfortune. James, Diep, and John stood there, three people, three fates once entangled in conflict, now bound together by an unseen darkness. Each carried their own burden, but all felt it clearly. An undercurrent was forming, wave after wave, ready to drag them into danger. Was John truly telling the truth? Or was he hiding some darker scheme behind his earnest words? Who was the shadow lurking in the night? Why were they watching James's family, and when would they strike? And no matter how strong James and Diep might be, could they really protect their family, protect little Nee's innocence from the unseen threats closing in? Those questions lingered in the air, unanswered, haunting, like invisible ghosts. Silence reigned, but in their hearts they all knew, the storm had not ended. Ahead of them lay a dark stage, with its cruel curtains still waiting to be lifted. Stay tuned for the next episode, as we uncover the truth behind the shadows that refuse to let go, and witness how James and Diep will confront the harsh trials pulling them ever deeper into the spiral of fate.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người phần tiếp theo của video về James và Lý Tử Diệp. Đây mọi người, hiện tại thì mình vẫn đang trong quá trình edit và chưa có hoàn thành. Bây giờ thì mình đang đến câu là mình xuất phụ đề á mọi người. Hiện tại mình xuất thêm phụ đề để cho mọi người khi nghe, thì nhiều khi nếu như mà cái giọng đọc của mình nó không được chuẩn hay là nó có sai ấy, thì mọi người cũng có thể xem phụ đề trên màn hình, hoặc là đối với một số người mà khả năng nghe hơi hạn chế thì cũng có thể xem bằng cách đọc phụ đề. Và hiện tại thì YouTube cũng có bản lồng tiếng, thì nó sẽ ra rất là nhiều quốc gia như Bồ Đào Nha, Tây Ban Nha các thứ, thì mọi người đều có thể nghe được. Mình hy vọng rằng mọi người có thể ủng hộ cho kênh mình nhiều hơn. Hãy đón xem kênh mình nhiều hơn trong những video tiếp theo nhé, để mình có động lực ra video đều và nhiều hơn. Cảm ơn mọi người rất nhiều. Bye bye.